So this is the worm farm as it is now. Today I'm going to try and move some worms from here up to the face of the windrow, where we have sifted a lot of this stuff out to be a lot finer grain, better food for the worms, so they'll eat it faster. The stuff back here, this about from this line right here all the way back, we call this our nursery pile. This is just finished compost, animal manure, sawdust, straw. It's all, we just kind of piled in here and we just packed in a whole bunch of worms that we bought. We've been letting them reproduce for a few months now, and now we're going to start moving them forward and harvesting this over the next week or so, and then replacing it with freshly sifted food for the worms. I'm going to peel a little bit back so you guys can see how many worms are in here. I mean, you can see we got it a little too wet, so it clumped up, but you can see the worms. We bought about 20,000 or so, a mix of reds and Europeans. I'm just tossing some ones that I already caught just by hand, and since they're a little stressed out, I'm gonna help them out, bury them a little bit. We're gonna get this all wet before we leave, so it'll be damp. It's kind of dried out the last few days. It's been a couple days since I've been here. So I've only scooped out just a few scoops, and I already kind of fixed the spot I scooped it from to get everything back to normal, so worms can keep reproducing in there and keep just multiplying. I only got a little bit of this little cement mixer bucket here. We should have a few thousand worms in here we can sort out and move in. I mean, they're really healthy worms, real big. We've run a little wet the last 2 weeks because it's been so hot. May have been a mistake. We're kind of letting it dry out a tiny bit. Anyway, I'll set this up and then just show you guys the sifting process. Since it's got a lot of rocks and clumps, I'm going to start off with a 1/2 inch, and I got kind of a bucket of dirt here to put the worms in as I grab them. I'll just put this here between my feet. Just kind of start grabbing little bits. I don't want to clump it up as I do it. Most of these worms will go through this first mesh, and once we're done with our 10-foot nursery section where we didn't sift the food beforehand because we were in a hurry, we won't need this 1/2 inch mesh anymore. We'll start right at the 1/4 inch. But it's got some pretty big size rocks in it. So, a little bit of shape. Break some of these clumps up because they're still good food. There's still some baby worms living in there. Yep, that's pretty good. And then I just toss this off to the side. Alright, we just keep going like that until we're done. Some of this stuff has already worked, and mostly castings, which is great. More clump to break up. Yeah, we're building a better machine. I'll make a video about that. A trommel rotary sifter that'll make this a lot faster. A lot faster, a lot less messy. It'll break up the clumps for us. Worms kind of get beat up in this process, but I haven't had too much die off from doing this, which is nice. But some of this is a little bit, it's almost too wet to sift, unfortunately, but gotta move them. Okay, so we went through the 1/2 inch. These are just little boxes I made, designed for these little tubs. It's just simple hardware cloth and wood. Went through the 1/4 inch, and you can see there's a lot of worms in here, and most are fine. Some got beat up. I noticed a few with little tears on them. They'll probably die. But we got several thousand. A few hundred dying isn't going to be the end of the world, but it's good stuff. We're going to move down to the 1/4 inch now. And then after that, we can move it over to the front of the bed. So just like before, we just moved from one box to the other. Now, this is where I actually start picking out a lot of the worms that I can grab, especially the bigger ones that won't go through the 1/4 inch screen real easy. And then I'll pile the rest of this over on the ground all in one spot, and then grabbing the rest of the worms that I can't get out is pretty easy by the time we're done. And I'll show you how I do that. It's a pretty common method. I'll just toss these in the bucket. And then I'm going to go put this on the ground over here. I'd say most of the worms are actually going on the ground back there. A large portion of them are too small for me to grab with my hand without hurting them too bad. The rest of the smaller ones go through the 1/4 inch no problem. A lot of the big European night crawlers are easy to pick up though. This must be sensory overload for them to be shook around, and I'm sure they go into shock for a few days and don't do much. In fact, I just checked the end of the bed where I had added some worms the other day, and most of them are alive and healthy, but haven't moved around very much. They're still kind of where I left them, which is kind of expected. Alright, nearly done with the 1/4 inch. I'll start pouring it in on that side. Kind of can't wait to get the new sifter, because this is not fun. That upside down so any caught worms in the mesh will be persuaded to drop down in there. Okay. All right. Got all that off the ground back there. Actually gonna do this part in here so it's easy to film. We'll let that stay in this pile. Move it all to one side. A lot of worms. Got my bucket of worms that I collected by hand down in here, and you can see we got quite a few. And those will be moved as well. There's only a few hundred that I grabbed by hand. So this is what goes in as food. Goes through this 1/4-inch screen. They've all kind of dug down. It's mostly castings at this point. I could harvest this and sell it. There's a whole lot of smaller red worms in there. Just stuff that can go through the 1/4-inch, a few large ones that made through. But mostly just little baby worms. If I were to get really close, you could see there's a few here and there wiggling around. Oh, there's one that's real little. So baby worms, cocoons, castings. This is all going to go on the front of the pile as kind of a new feeding. They could rework it. One thing I noticed when I was digging down through here is the Europeans hang out around the top, and I can kind of show that right now. So I just come right here. This is dry on the top 1/2 inch. But if I scrape back just a little bit, I mean they're right there. They're right on the top. Just an inch down. And so they're actually kind of living almost touching this dry part. And I wet down this dry part at least once a week just to keep the moisture good. I used to do it twice a week, but like I said, we noticed that the moisture level was too high. They're basically too wet and they're just getting lazy. I pull them out and they're really, really pale. They're not doing much. And so now that we've dried it up a little bit, I've noticed they're a lot more active. Okay, so this method, I'm sure anyone watching this video who's interested in worms and worm farms knows it. You just let the sun, even though we're indoors here, the worms aren't liking the sun. You just kind of slowly keep moving the, let me switch hands real quick, the top away. You just kind of grab little bits, make sure you don't got any worms, and just move it off to the side. Eventually, you just gotta wait a little while, so I'm gonna work on the farm a little bit, and then come back to this, and we'll take off more off the top, and we'll eventually get to our pile of worms. We're gonna move to the front. Now I don't want to go too wet. Since most of this is just wet just under the surface here, I'm mostly just dampening this top dry layer. The rest of the farm is pretty much the dampness that I want it to be. I don't want to go any wetter than it already is. A kink. There we go. So just kind of lightly, like that. Just kind of lightly water it. Just enough to wet that top. That's about good. I'll bring that food over. It's kind of a small feeding today since I'm only focusing on moving worms. This isn't really a full feeding, it's just nice to mix in some new meat on the front. Last couple out there. All right. So that back end has been being eaten really slow. Mostly because it was just straight raw compost, you know, animal manure compost. And it had rocks and chunks in it and stuff, and it wasn't really broken up when we put it in there, but we had ordered worms and we were in a hurry to put them in, so we just did it. So they haven't been eating that very fast. I've gotten a couple 5-gallon buckets of castings out of it, but compared to this end, it's night and day. They eat this finer stuff. They move through it really quick. They finish up, and you see some of these ones coming to the surface here. They'll dive down and they'll get to work. One thing I like to do to keep the worm farm kind of working evenly is just kind of rake this stuff out smooth. Make sure it's in a nice even layer and fed all the way through. That way you don't get any spots that are hot spots or done earlier than other spots. Worms just evenly work the whole farm, and you can kind of know what you're going to harvest and when it's going to be done. There's really not, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. You just keep everything organized. I've moved this into the sun. Encourage this to happen a little faster than it was. So simple method, you just make the worms scared. They hate the sun. They move away from the sun. You just keep scraping dirt off, check for worms, scrape more. I actually did a little bit before I started filming again, so we're getting down to the dense pockets. I'm just kind of scraping the edges. Some of the worms aren't quite digging fast enough, but that's on them. It's tedious, but until I get my better sorter built, this is the way it's got to be done. Some of these just grab and toss in the bucket. I don't have time to wait for them. I know some of you might laugh seeing me almost caring about every single worm, but the farm is still small. Every worm counts right now. I'm sure in a few months won't really bat an eye about losing a few hundred or a few thousand here and there during the sorting process. Right now, every worm's worth it. Some of these are almost ready to drop cocoons. So these will be great to put in the front of the farm. All right, we're gonna pile this up and we're kind of getting down to worms. Pile this up and let them dig down again. Yeah, I can't grab any more dirt without grabbing worms. All right, let's see how far they've dug down. Kind of scrape off the top. We're actually getting near the end where it's almost just not even worth waiting anymore. I've seen guys do it to where they go all the way down where there's almost nothing but worms. If I had the time, and if this wasn't already mostly just crumpled up compost, I'd probably do that. But I don't. About ready for the reveal. And these are some big, healthy worms. They're doing awesome. I'll be doing a review video of all the worm farms I ordered from. Kind of pros and cons, what I liked about them, what I didn't like about them. It was actually more difficult finding a worm guy than I thought. I found one I really like, and like I said, I'll do another video like that, a video about that in the near future. Alright, I think we're about ready to flip this and see what we got. Yeah, there they all are. We'll just put those. I mean, there's just tons and tons of worms. They're all mad. Put those in our bucket. Like I said, we could have gone down to where it was just worms, but putting some of this coarser stuff in the food end isn't the end of the world. Gotta sift it eventually anyway. Let's have a couple big chunks here and there. All right. Got our bucket of worms. If that'll focus. Yeah, I couldn't tell. Take it down to the end of the farm. Pour it in. Pretty awesome. Should be right at home. Kind of spread them out. I notice if I don't spread them out, they like to just kind of take their time, hang out, but then we gotta go look for each other. But I mean, we got good clumps of worms. Just kind of sprinkle them out up there. They love this sifted stuff. They go to town on it. All right. Awesome. Okay, the final thing I like to do on this farm is roll out this landscape cloth to kind of lock in some moisture, but also allow a place to breathe, and I stop it about right there. So any worms thinking about escaping kind of hit the light and they give up. And then I just stake it down. Kind of overkilled it on the stakes last time, so I'm gonna do a little less this time. Like I said, this just kind of locks in that moisture just a little bit. All right, and then I'll just stake down that entire thing. Okay, so that's all packed away. They've been fed, worms moved, new cloth put on. The dogs tore up the old cloth, rip it off over there. So I also got these gauges that I check every day that I'm here and I record. Where that focuses. So we're at about 68. What's nice is no matter how hot it gets outside, that's about my temperature because we're always covered in shade. My moisture meter, I have one on the front, or on the back and the front over here. And I used to think 5 was about where I wanted. Now I'm realizing 2.5 or 3 is ideal. Then I got pH right there. 5 was just too wet. I need to get better gauges or something because I thought that those were percentages. I was like, oh, 50% moisture is probably pretty good. It's some arbitrary numbering system because you dig in there when it's 5 or 6, it's just sloppy mud, way too wet for the worms to breathe or do anything. But so I think that's the end of this video, first one. I'm just gonna make videos as I move along and kind of have everyone watch this giant farm build. We got